From LSR Radio, this is the Last Scout Report for March 12th, 2018. World U.S. and European arms sales to Middle East soar amid widespread conflict. Arms imported by Middle East countries mired in violent conflict have doubled in 10 years, and the U.S. and Europe remain the major suppliers, according to the latest research. Arms imports by Middle Eastern states have more than doubled over the past decade, with the U.S. and European countries the main supplier of weapons to the region. This is one of the main conclusions of the latest report by SIPRI, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. The independent think tank dedicated to arms control and disarmament says volumes of international major weapons shipments rose by 10% between 2013 and 2017 compared to the previous 5-year period, largely due to an increase to the Far East and the Middle East. 5 countries, the United States, Russia, France, Germany, and China, accounted for nearly 3/4 of all arms exports over the past 5 years. The report finds that arms imports by states in the Middle East increased by 103% in the 2 periods from 2008 and 2012 and 2013 through 17, accounting for almost a third of global weapons imports in the latter period. It points out that over the past 5 years, most states in the region have been directly involved in violent conflict. In particular, the war in Yemen is believed to have boosted European sales of weapons, heavily backing Saudi Arabia and its intervention against Houthi rebels. The U.S. and European states remain the main arms exporters to the region and supplied over 98% of weapons imported by Saudi Arabia, said Peter Wiseman, senior researcher with the SIPRI Arms and Military Expenditure Program, noting that concerns about the conflict and human rights abuses in the Middle East had led to political debate about restricting arms sales. Saudi Arabia, the world's largest arms importer, saw a 225% increase in arms imports in 2013 through 17 compared to 2008 through 12. Arms imports by Egypt grew by 215% over the past 10 years, making it now the third largest importer in the world. In January this year, Germany halted weapons exports to all parties in the Yemen conflict, including Saudi Arabia. It followed much criticism in the country of arms exports to nations with poor human rights records. The government was forced to admit that its sales of weapons to Saudi Arabia and Egypt had risen nearly 5-fold in a year. Egypt is involved in several conflicts. It has its own internal conflict in the Sinai, where weapons which have been supplied are actually used quite quickly after they have been supplied. This is a major concern about the role of ISIS in particular, again in the Sinai, of course, but also in Libya. And also there we see that Egypt has used major arms, Wiseman told Euronews, citing an attack on targets using newly delivered French combat aircraft. SIPRI believes that Egypt's demand for arms is also influenced by its role in Europe. It plays a secondary role alongside Saudi Arabia and the UAE, as well as the fact that the country is under military leadership. Wiseman believes that the growing aversion in several European countries to arms exports to Middle Eastern nations such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates could have an impact on the figures in the years to come. However, he adds, there will be plenty of countries which have shown they have no interest in restricting arms to Saudi Arabia and certainly not to the UAE. The UK saw a 37% increase in arms exports between 2013 to 7 compared to the previous year period of 2008 through 12. The increase in exports can be linked to major deals with Saudi Arabia, that there's their main market by far, and a few other details, Wiseman said, adding that there is no reasons for such a clear rise. France, which has also become a major supplier to Saudi Arabia in the 70s, saw a 27% increase in arms exports between the 2 periods to become the third largest arms exporter in 2013 through 17. Recent reports suggest little sign of change in French policy over weapons sales to Saudi Arabia. The report finds that the United States had extended its lead as the world's main supplier of arms. Exports increased by a quarter between 2008 through 12 and 2013 through 17, and by least last year, the country accounted for a third of the global total of 34%. Based on deals signed during the Obama administration, U.S. arms deliveries in 2013 through 17 reached their highest level since the late 1990s, said Dr. Audie Florent, director of the SIPRI Arms and Military Expenditure Program. These deals and further major contracts signed in 2017 will ensure that the USA remains the largest arms exporter in the coming years. Arms exports by Russia decreased by over 7% between 2008 and 12 and 2013 through 17, the report says. There was a growing relation with Russia before 2014, even including arms sales to the country, and that, of course, fell completely away with the invasion of Crimea and the annexation of Crimea and subsequent sanctions by EU on Russia, including an arms embargo, Peter Wiseman told Euronews. He also noted an increase in demand for arms by some of Russia's European neighbors and growing security concerns. Some of these countries are quite small, Wiseman said, citing the Baltic states, but you can see the increasing demand there, and they certainly look to European suppliers to build that demand. Turkey remains an important market for European exporters, but SIPRI's reports finds that it is also fast developing its own arms industry, including for export. The country is the 11th most important client among the 5 major European arm exporters, while its own exports more than doubled between 2008-12 and 2013 through 17, notably to Turkmenistan, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. However, they are still independent on foreign technology, and that causes some problems for them with regard to some of their suppliers, Wiseman said. However, he believes that concerns about Turkey's leadership, foreign policy, and domestic situation may have an increasing impact on arms sales. Turkish action against Kurdish groups in Syria have been condemned, as has the crackdown led by President Erdogan's government against dissenting opinion at home. In Germany, there has been a very clear debate about whether or not to stop arms exports to Turkey or at least restrict them, and right now the tendency is towards restriction, Wiseman said, but I think elsewhere in Europe, in France, as far as I know, it hasn't been a major concern yet, and there is still a very big willingness to supply weapons and also weapon technology to Turkey. The analyst believes that major changes are likely in Turkey in the coming years as the country becomes less independent on arm imports, especially from Europe. From LSR Radio, this has been the Last Scout Report.